The rain was falling softly over Winterfell, making the air thick with cold. It was the same day King Robert Baratheon came north, just like in the old tales. But in this version of the story, something was different, very different. One decision, one conversation would change the entire future of Westeros. Robert sat in the quiet Godswood with his old friend, Ned Stark. The sounds of leaves rustling and water dripping made it feel like the gods were listening. "You were always the quiet one, Ned," Robert said, staring into the heart tree. "But I need you to speak now. I don't just want you to be my hand. I need you to be my brother again. Truly." Ned looked at Robert carefully. In the real world, he would have said yes, out of duty, out of loyalty. But this time, he didn't answer so quickly. He had seen too much, too many lies, too much blood. "Before I say yes," Ned said slowly, "I need you to answer one truth." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "Why did you kill Rhaegar's children?" Ned asked, his voice calm but cold. "They were just babes." Robert's smile faded. "You still believe that old tale? That I ordered that?" He leaned forward. "That was Tywin. He did it to please me, true, but I never asked for it." "But you let him rise for it," Ned replied. "You let a man who smashed a baby's head into a wall become warden of the West. You married Cersei, his daughter. You made peace with monsters, Robert." Robert stood up. "What would you have me do, Ned? Keep fighting forever? Burn down all of Westeros in the name of honor?" Ned didn't answer. Because in truth, he didn't know. But he knew he couldn't go south unless the past was faced, truly and fully. Then came the voice that no one expected, Lady Catelyn. She had followed them, quietly, unnoticed. But now she stepped out of the trees. "If you want Ned to serve," she said softly, "then give him the one truth he has always wanted." Robert turned to her. "And what's that, my lady?" "The truth about Jon Snow," she said. Ned's eyes widened in shock. "Cat, no," she interrupted. "I've lived with that boy in my house for 14 years, and for 14 years you've kept that secret. I thought it was a betrayal, but now I think it's fear. And maybe if you say it here, now, something good can come from it." Robert turned toward Ned. "Is it true?" he asked. "Is the boy not your son?" Ned looked down, silent for a moment. Then he looked up. "He is Lyanna's," he said, "not mine, and not Rhaegar's victim. He was Rhaegar's son. They married in secret. And when she died, she made me promise to protect him." Robert's face twisted. He stepped back like he'd been struck. "You knew," Robert whispered. "All this time you knew, and you let me hate him." "You loved Lyanna," Ned said gently, "but you never really knew her. She didn't want a crown. She wanted to be free." The silence after that was heavy. Then Robert laughed, but it was hollow. "I've built my kingdom on a lie," he muttered. "My war, my throne." "No," Ned said. "You ended the madness of the Targaryens, but maybe it's time to end the madness of lies." That night, something changed. Robert didn't offer Ned the handship. Instead, he made a decision that would shake the roots of every house in Westeros. He would reveal Jon Snow's true name. They would send ravens across the realm. Rhaegar's son, Aegon Targaryen, lived, but he was not coming to take the throne by fire and blood. He would come as the bridge between the past and future. This one truth, once whispered only in dark halls, was now going to be shouted in the halls of power. And across Westeros, from Dragonstone to Casterly Rock, people would soon learn. The true heir lived, and the Game of Thrones had just changed forever. The morning sun rose over Winterfell, but the warmth never reached the cold halls. Word spread fast among the lords and knights who travelled with King Robert. Something had shifted. They felt it in how Robert walked. Slower, heavier, but with a strange kind of purpose, like a man who had tasted the truth after choking on lies for too long. Jon Snow stood near the training yard, a wooden sword in hand, sparring with Robb Stark. He didn't notice the three pairs of eyes watching him from the balcony above, Robert, Ned, and Catelyn. "That boy," Robert said quietly, his tone unreadable. "He looks like him." Ned's jaw tightened. "He has Lyanna's eyes." Robert's face darkened, and Rhaegar's blood. Catelyn glanced at Robert, then looked away. She had always hated Jon, not just for being the supposed bastard of her husband, but for what he represented, a shadow in her home, a quiet, constant reminder of betrayal. But now, knowing he was the son of a Targaryen and her husband's dead sister, something shifted in her too. "You mean to announce it then?" she asked. Robert nodded slowly. "The realm needs the truth. I've ruled with ghosts whispering in my ears for too long. Tywin's gold, Littlefinger's games, Varys' riddles. Maybe it's time someone ruled who has fire and honor both in their blood." Catelyn hesitated. "And what of your children?" Robert didn't answer, because in his heart he already knew his children were not truly his. Deep down he had always felt it. Joffrey's cruelty, Marcella's golden hair, Tommen's softness, none of them felt like a Baratheon. But what stunned more was the thought that Cersei had fooled him all these years. Before Ned could speak, Maester Luwin appeared behind them, pale and breathless. "A raven from King's Landing," he said. "Urgent." Robert opened the letter with trembling hands. His eyes scanned it quickly, then slowly his fingers crushed the parchment. "Jon Arryn is dead," he said bitterly. "Poisoned." Ned froze. Jon Arryn had been like a father to him, to Robert both. His death was the reason Robert had come north, to find a new hand. But now it looked like Jon Arryn had been silenced. "Someone didn't want him to speak," Ned said darkly. "He knew something." Robert's jaw clenched. "And so do we now. We can't stay silent." That evening a feast was held, not for celebration, but to honor Jon Arryn's memory. The hall was quieter than usual. Robert stood up slowly, raising his cup. But his eyes didn't hold wine. They held fire. "My lords," he began, his voice echoing through the stone walls, "I've ruled for 15 years, since we tore down the Mad King. But I've learned something today. We didn't kill all the lies." He turned toward Jon Snow, who looked confused, sitting at the far end of the Stark table. "There is a boy in this hall," Robert continued, "raised as a Snow, but born as a dragon." Gasps echoed across the room. Some rose from their chairs. Sir Barristan Selmy, sitting near the king, leaned forward in disbelief. Robert gestured toward Jon. "This is Aegon Targaryen, son of Prince Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark. Not a bastard, not a threat, but blood of kings and of wolves." Jon stood slowly, stunned. "My lord, what is this?" Ned stood beside him. "It's the truth, Jon. You were never my shame. You were my promise." Whispers flooded the hall. Faces turned pale. Some glared, others bowed their heads. But one man rose and left before the king even finished. Petyr Baelish. His plans, all tied to secrets and shadows, had just begun to unravel. Later that night, Catelyn found Jon standing alone in the Godswood. "You must hate me," she said, her voice tight, "for how I treated you." Jon shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to feel." She looked down. "If you are truly Lyanna's son, then I've wronged you deeply. And if you are Rhaegar's, then I fear for you. The realm won't accept you easily." "I don't want a crown," Jon whispered. "But a crown may come looking for you," she replied. Above them, a raven flew into the night sky, carrying a letter from Winterfell to the Vale, to River Run, to King's Landing, and even further. The truth had taken flight, and Westeros would never be the same. The morning sun rose over Winterfell, but the warmth never reached the cold halls. Word spread fast among the lords and knights who travelled with King Robert. Something had shifted. They felt it in how Robert walked. Slower, heavier, but with a strange kind of purpose, like a man who had tasted the truth after choking on lies for too long. Jon Snow stood near the training yard, a wooden sword in hand, sparring with Robb Stark. He didn't notice the 3 pairs of eyes watching him from the balcony above. Robert, Ned, and Catelyn. "That boy," Robert said quietly, his tone unreadable. "He looks like him." Ned's jaw tightened. "He has Lyanna's eyes." Robert's face darkened, and Rhaegar's blood. Catelyn glanced at Robert, then looked away. She had always hated Jon, not just for being the supposed bastard of her husband, but for what he represented. A shadow in her home, a quiet, constant reminder of betrayal. But now, knowing he was the son of a Targaryen and her husband's dead sister, something shifted in her too. "You mean to announce it then?" she asked. Robert nodded slowly. "The realm needs the truth. I've ruled with ghosts whispering in my ears for too long. Tywin's gold, Littlefinger's games, Varys's riddles. Maybe it's time someone ruled who has fire and honor both in their blood." Catelyn hesitated. "And what of your children?" Robert didn't answer, because in his heart he already knew his children were not truly his. Deep down he had always felt it. Joffrey's cruelty, Marcella's golden hair, Tommen's softness, none of them felt like a Baratheon. But what stung more was the thought that Cersei had fooled him all these years. Before Ned could speak, Maester Luwin appeared behind them, pale and breathless. "A raven from King's Landing," he said. "Urgent." Robert opened the letter with trembling hands. His eyes scanned it quickly, then slowly, his fingers crushed the parchment. "Jon Arryn is dead," he said bitterly. "Poisoned." Ned froze. Jon Arryn had been like a father to him, to Robert, both. His death was the reason Robert had come north, to find a new hand. But now it looked like Jon Arryn had been silenced. "Someone didn't want him to speak," Ned said darkly. "He knew something." Robert's jaw clenched. "And so do we now. We can't stay silent." That evening a feast was held, not for celebration, but to honor Jon Arryn's memory. The hall was quieter than usual. Robert stood up slowly, raising his cup, but his eyes didn't hold wine. They held fire. "My lords," he began, his voice echoing through the stone walls, "I've ruled for 15 years since we tore down the Mad King, but I've learned something today. We didn't kill all the lies." He turned toward Jon Snow, who looked confused, sitting at the far end of the Stark table. "There is a boy in this hall," Robert continued, "raised as a Snow, but born as a dragon." Gasps echoed across the room. Some rose from their chairs. Ser Barristan Selmy, sitting near the king, leaned forward in disbelief. Robert gestured toward Jon. "This is Aegon Targaryen, son of Prince Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark. Not a bastard, not a threat, but blood of kings and of wolves." Jon stood slowly, stunned. "My lord, what is this?" Ned stood beside him. "It's the truth, Jon. You were never my shame. You were my promise." Whispers flooded the hall. Faces turned pale. Some glared, others bowed their heads. But one man rose and left before the king even finished. Petyr Baelish. His plans, all tied to secrets and shadows, had just begun to unravel. Later that night, Catelyn found Jon standing alone in the Godswood. You must hate me, she said, her voice tight, for how I treated you. Jon shook his head slowly. I don't know what to feel. She looked down. If you are truly Lyanna's son, then I wronged you deeply, and if you are Rhaegar's, then I fear for you. The realm won't accept you easily. I don't want a crown, Jon whispered, but a crown may come looking for you, she replied. Above them, a raven flew into the night sky, carrying a letter from Winterfell to the Vale, to Riverrun, to King's Landing, and even further. The truth had taken flight, and Westeros would never be the same. The letter reached King's Landing just as the sun dipped behind the Red Keep, casting long shadows over the city. In the Tower of the Hand, Queen Cersei Lannister read the message with trembling hands. Her lips pressed into a thin line as her eyes scanned the words again and again, hoping they would change. Jon Snow, no, Aegon Targaryen, had been revealed, and Robert had spoken the words himself. Her fingers tightened until the parchment tore. He dares, she hissed, pacing the chamber like a lioness in a cage. He dares speak Rhaegar's name with honor? He dares claim a Targaryen boy has a place in this realm? Jaime sat silently in the corner, polishing his sword. You always said Robert was a drunk fool. Now you're surprised he's also a sentimental one. This isn't sentiment, it's betrayal. Your children, Jaime said, his tone suddenly sharp, are in danger now. Cersei stopped moving. They always were, but now it's no longer from Robert's neglect, it's from his truth. Jaime stood. You knew this day would come. She nodded slowly. Yes. But I never thought it would come from him. In the Eyrie, Lysa Arryn received the same letter. Her hands shook as she read the words. Her son, sweet and fragile Robin, clung to her skirts, but she barely noticed. Jon Arryn had died for a secret, and now that secret was laid bare. Too late, she whispered, bitter tears rolling down her cheeks. You should have stayed quiet, Ned. You should have let it rot in the dark where it belonged. She turned to Maester Catelyn. Write back to the king. Tell him the Vale will not recognize a Targaryen, no matter whose wolf raised him. Back in Winterfell, Jon, no longer just a Snow, walked in silence with Ned through the quiet paths behind the crypts. He had been down there before, looking at the statues of old kings and warriors, but now they felt like his kin. His true kin. You lied to me, Jon said softly. I protected you, Ned replied. If Robert had known, back then, you would have died in your cradle. Do you really believe that? Ned stopped walking. He hated Rhaegar. That hatred blinded him. I believed he would never harm Lyanna's son if he thought he was mine, so I bore the dishonor. Jon looked at his father. No, his uncle, and for the first time didn't feel like a mistake. He felt like a secret weapon the world never saw coming. But why now? Jon asked. Why reveal it? Because Robert is changing, Ned said. He's tired of being a king of corpses and regrets. He wants to end the lies. Jon exhaled slowly. And what am I supposed to do with this truth? Rule. You don't have to want the throne, Ned replied. But you must understand, others will want it for you, or will fear you for it. Far to the east, across the narrow sea, in a candle-lit chamber in Pentos, another Targaryen stirred. Viserys slammed the goblet down. Lies! The wolf lies. Aegon died at the Trident. My nephew is dead. But Daenerys, quiet and calm, read the Raven Scroll again. Her silver hair glowed in the firelight. What if it's true? She whispered. What if my brother's son lived? Viserys sneered. Then he's a traitor to our blood, raised by the very dogs who slaughtered our family. Daenerys touched the scroll. But if he is Aegon, then he is the rightful heir, not us. Viserys turned on her. You will not say that again. I am the dragon. He's just a bastard with a fancy name. He will kneel, or he will burn. At Castle Black, the Night's watched the flames dance higher than usual. Ghost, Jon's direwolf, howled into the night, an eerie, mournful cry. Old Maester Aemon sat near the fire, blind eyes turned toward the sound. A Targaryen, alone in the world, he muttered, is a terrible thing. But this one wasn't alone anymore. In Winterfell, Jon stood on the battlements, looking out at the frozen north. Aegon Targaryen. The name didn't sit right on his tongue, but it pulsed in his blood. He had no desire for power, no hunger for crowns. But now he was no longer invisible. No longer just a bastard. He was a flame the realm couldn't ignore. And in the shadows, enemies were already sharpening their knives. The wind howled over Winterfell that night like a warning from the old gods themselves. Snow fell steadily, blanketing the castle in silence. But within its stone walls, the air was anything but calm. In the great hall, lords from across the north and beyond had begun to arrive after hearing the news. The message had spread like wildfire. Rhaegar Targaryen's son lived, and he was in Winterfell. Some came to offer support. Some came to see the boy with their own eyes. And some came to plan his death. Jon sat stiffly in the chair beside Lord Eddard, his face unreadable. He wore no crown, no fine cloak, just the black leathers he always had. Yet the eyes in the room couldn't stop watching him, some with curiosity, others with fear. Lord Manderley leaned toward Ned and whispered, "Is it true? The boy is really Rhaegar's?" Ned gave a solemn nod. "My sister Lyanna's son, born in secret, raised in silence. Then he has a claim to the Iron Throne," said Lord Serwyn, frowning. "Stronger than Robert's, if the bloodlines are to be trusted." Jon stood suddenly. "I never asked for this," he said, voice steady. "I am not here to take thrones or start wars. I've lived my life as a Stark, and I will die one, if the North will have me." The room murmured at that. Some nodded in respect, others whispered darker thoughts. That night, in the quiet of his chambers, Ned found Maester Luwin at the desk, scribbling rapidly. "They're waiting, Lord Stark," Luwin said. "The realm is watching. Some already call him the true dragon." "I never wanted this," Ned replied, rubbing his temples. "I wanted peace, a quiet life, but peace doesn't live in Westeros for long." Luwin looked up. "Then perhaps you must choose the storm before it chooses you." Far to the west, in the smoky halls of Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister received the raven. His golden eyes narrowed as he read the message. He handed it silently to Kevan. "A living Targaryen," Kevan muttered, recognized by the king himself. Tywin sipped his wine, unfazed. "Then Robert has grown foolish or weak. What will you do?" Kevan asked. "I will do what I always do," Tywin said coldly. "Survive, and ensure that my legacy survives with me." He looked out the tall window, staring into the distance. "Send word to the Red Keep. Tell Cersei to hold the children close, especially the boy. And if the king turns against her..." Tywin's mouth curved into something like a smile. "Then we remind him why lions do not fear wolves or dragons." In King's Landing, Cersei met with Varys in the dead of night, in a shadowy corner of the dungeons. "You served Aerys," she whispered. "You've danced for Targaryens before. Tell me, will you dance for another?" Varys gave a polite smile, but his eyes were cold. "I dance only for the realm, Your Grace, and the realm is shifting." "If Jon Snow becomes more than a name," Cersei said through clenched teeth, "then my children die." "Not if you act first," Varys replied, his voice almost tender. "Find the right piece to move, and you can topple the board." Cersei stared at him, then nodded slowly. "Then it's time the realm remembered how dangerous a mother can be." Meanwhile, Jon stood once again in the Godswood, where the secret had first been revealed. Robb approached him, quiet, unsure. "You're my brother," Jon said, before Robb could speak. "I know," Robb said, trying to smile. "But now you're also something more, a prince." Jon shook his head. "A name doesn't change who I am. I don't want crowns. I want peace." Robb looked down. "You may not want it, Jon, but people will make you choose. And when they do, I'll stand by you." They clasped hands, not as rivals, not as a king and a prince, but as brothers. Still, in the shadows of the Godswood, a raven watched, black as night. Eyes like ink, it turned once, then flew off into the cold night sky, carrying whispers, carrying war, because the game had changed and the players were moving faster than ever. By the time dawn broke again over Winterfell, the north was already buzzing with tension, not because of an army at the gates or a new warlord crossing the sea, but because of a boy with a name that hadn't been spoken with reverence in nearly 2 decades. Aegon Targaryen. The North had always prided itself on loyalty and tradition, but loyalty could falter when mixed with fear, and traditions could crumble under the weight of old blood returning from the grave. In the Great Solar, Ned Stark met with the Northern Lords once more. The fire crackled in the hearth, but no one felt its warmth. Lord Glover stood first. "With all respect, Lord Stark, how do we know this isn't some game? Some trick by the crown to plant a dragon in the north?" Ned didn't flinch. "You know me. You've known me your whole lives. Do you believe I would lie to you now?" "No," Plover said slowly, "but you kept the truth hidden for nearly 15 years. That's not a small betrayal." Ned's voice was calm but firm. "It was not a betrayal, it was a promise to my sister. A promise that saved a child from being butchered in his crib." There was silence. Then Lord Umber snorted loudly. "Promise or not, it's a problem now. Dragons don't belong in the north. They never did. And if this boy's got a claim, then every snake in the south will be crawling toward us, ready to bite." "And what do you propose?" Ned asked coolly. "We kill the boy, slit his throat, and bury the truth with him?" Nobody answered. But the silence was enough. Outside, Jon trained alone in the snow, the thud of his sword against the training post echoing across the yard. Every swing was harder than the last, fueled by the weight pressing down on him. He wasn't just fighting to stay sharp, he was fighting the feeling of not belonging all over again. Samwell Tarly, newly arrived with his father's men, approached hesitantly. "You know," he said nervously, "Aegon was a name carried by kings, great kings." Jon stopped, breathing heavily. "And I'm not one of them." Sam shrugged. "Maybe not, but they weren't raised by Ned Stark. That counts for something." Jon gave a faint smile. "What are you doing here, Sam?" "My father sent me," Sam said quietly. "He wanted to see for himself if the rumors were true. He didn't come, of course. Just sent me. Like I'm disposable." Jon looked at him. "You're not." Sam chuckled. "Tell that to my father." "But you have power now, Jon. Real power. You could change things. Maybe for good. Maybe not. But they're watching you, whether you want it or not." Jon turned toward the castle walls. "I feel like a wolf being painted with dragon's fire." In King's Landing, the small council sat in stunned silence after Robert read them the official proclamation. Littlefinger was the first to speak. You're legitimizing a Targaryen in writing. He's not just a Targaryen, Robert growled. He's Lyanna's son, my blood in every way that matters. Varys leaned forward. This will cause unrest. The lords who bent the knee to you will feel betrayed. Robert slammed his goblet down. Let them feel whatever they want. I'm done living a lie. But Cersei sat quietly, unmoving. Her face was a mask, but behind her green eyes was pure calculation. After the council dispersed, she found her way to Qyburn's chambers, the dark places beneath the Red Keep, where whispers were turned into weapons. He's made his choice, she said calmly. Now I'll make mine. Qyburn gave a thin smile. Shall it be poison or steel, your grace? Neither, she said. It will be fire, the kind that burns everything around it. Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, a group of cloaked riders made their way through the woods. At their center, hidden beneath a black hood, was Arya Stark. She had received Sansa's raven in Braavos. The moment she read the words, "Jon is not who we thought he was." Something in her had shifted. Now, as they neared the north, her face was cold, her eyes sharper than ever. He's still my brother, she whispered. But if they're trying to make him a king, she didn't finish the thought. But the edge of her blade glinted in the moonlight. The game was no longer just about thrones. It was about truth. And truth had a way of breaking kingdoms. Snow fell harder that night, thick flakes swirling over Winterfell like the gods themselves were trying to hide it from the world. But not even snow could cover what was coming. The castle was no longer a place of quiet honor. It was a storm waiting to explode, and Jon Snow, now known as Aegon Targaryen, stood in the center of it. Inside the great hall, another meeting had been called. But this time, it wasn't Ned Stark who led it. It was Jon. The hall was filled with northern bannermen, soldiers, and southern envoys who had arrived ahead of the royal delegation. The air was tight with suspicion. Every eye was watching Jon, some with awe, some with hatred, and some with the cold calculation of men already choosing sides. Jon stepped forward, his voice steady but colder than the wind outside. I never asked for this name. I never asked for this blood. But I will not run from it. I am the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. That is the truth. Murmurs spread. Lord Serwyn frowned. Then whose side are you on, boy? The North or the dragons? I am both, Jon answered, and I will protect both, or die trying. Lord Glover stood up sharply. You say that now, but blood speaks louder than words. We remember what Targaryens did to the North. We remember burning castles and murdered kin. How long before the fire in you turns against us? Before Jon could speak, a voice rang out near the back of the hall. Then you don't know him at all. All heads turned. It was Sansa, having just arrived from the Vale. Her red hair was dusted with snow, her cheeks flushed from the cold. But her presence was sharp, commanding, queenly. She stepped forward, eyes locked on Glover. You want to speak of trust? Then trust in who raised him. Jon Snow was raised in this castle by Ned Stark. He bled for Winterfell, for the North, for every one of you. Where were your loyalties then, when the Boltons had this place in chains? Glover fell quiet. Others looked away. Jon met Sansa's gaze and gave a faint nod. But behind that look was something else. A flicker of worry. She was taking command. And not everyone would like it. Later that night, the siblings met alone by the hearth in Ned's old study. You didn't have to speak for me, Jon said softly. I didn't do it for you, Sansa replied. I did it for the North. They're scared of you now, Jon, not because of who you are, but because of what you might become. I'm still me, but that's not what they see anymore, she said. They see the blood of kings, and kings bring war. Jon looked down. Maybe I should leave, go south, remove the threat. Sansa's eyes flashed, and abandon the north to the whispers that you're plotting in the shadows. That would only feed their fears. No, if you want peace, Jon, you'll have to fight for it. There was a knock at the door. Maester Luwin entered, pale and breathless. A raven from Castle Black. Jon stood up immediately. "What is it?" "The dead," Luwin said, swallowing. They've reached the last hearth. Silence fell like a hammer. Jon's fists clenched. "How long do we have?" "Days. If that." Sansa paled. "Then it doesn't matter what your name is. The only thing that matters now is survival." But even as the North braced for war, others moved in secret. In a dark forest far from Winterfell, Arya Stark watched a group of Lannister men set up camp. Her face was blank, but her eyes were focused on one thing: the red cloak bearing the lion's sigil. "I need one of them alive," she whispered to Gendry, who stood beside her. He looked at her warily. "For what?" Arya drew a blade from her sleeve. "To send a message. The Queen wants Jon dead, and I plan to answer first." And deep below the Red Keep, in the black cells where light dared not linger, Qyburn was performing his newest experiment. A poison, colorless and odorless, tested on a rat. The creature twitched, then fell still. Cersei watched, her smile tight and cruel. "When the right cup is placed before him," she said, "I want it to be the last thing he ever tastes." The truth had been spoken, but in Westeros, truth was just the first cut. The real bleeding was about to begin. Snow didn't fall the next morning, it crashed. The skies over Winterfell had turned steel grey, and the wind screamed like a dying beast. But inside the castle, things were quieter than ever. Too quiet. As if everyone was holding their breath for the storm that had nothing to do with weather. Jon stood atop the battlements, cloaked in black, eyes set on the white horizon. His mind raced, not with thoughts of thrones or dragons, but of the message from the wall. The dead were moving. The army of the Night King was no longer a myth whispered around campfires. It was real, and it was almost here. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind him. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. He knew it was her. Sansa stood beside him, arms folded. Her voice was steady but low. "Ravens have been sent. The Vale, the Riverlands, even Riverrun. But most won't come." Jon gave a small, bitter laugh. "Of course they won't. Why would they fight for a Targaryen?" She looked at him sharply. "Don't say that. You're still Jon." He turned toward her. "Am I? To them, I'm just a name now. A threat. A dragon wrapped in wolf skin." Sansa looked away. "You're both, and that's what frightens them most." Jon nodded slowly. "And Cersei, have we heard anything?" "She's silent," Sansa replied. "Which is worse than a threat. Silence means planning. And if what Arya said is true—" He stared ahead grimly. "Then she's already decided I have to die." Inside the great hall, Arya knelt beside a map sprawled across the table. Her fingers traced the line of castles between the last hearth and Winterfell. "They're not marching," she said. "They're hunting, spreading out, pulling people out of villages, burning them as they move. Like wolves in a snowstorm," Gendry muttered beside her. "Only worse." Arya's eyes flicked to the north. "They'll be here in 3 days. 4 at most." The door creaked open. Bran wheeled in, his eyes distant, too distant, like they were already staring at something none of them could see. "They've passed the Umber crypts," he said. "And the children, they've joined them." Arya froze. "What do you mean, joined them?" "They don't stay dead," Bran replied simply. "They rise, everyone, even the smallest." A heavy silence filled the room. Gendry shivered. Gods help us. Meanwhile, far across the realm, in the Red Keep's darkest chambers, Cersei Lannister stood over a long wooden table lined with pieces, lions, wolves, stags, and dragons. She moved the lion piece to Winterfell. Qyburn entered, bowing low. "Your Grace, the poison is ready. Our little birds are in position. All we need is the moment." Cersei's lips curled into a thin smile. "He'll die a hero then, defending the North, a tragic martyr. The North will cry, the South will breathe easy, and the dragon threat will be buried in snow and ash." Qyburn nodded. "And the girl, the Stark assassin, she's no fool." "But she's alone," Cersei said coldly, "and the night is full of sharp ends." Back at Winterfell, Jon stood in the crypts, alone with the dead. The statues watched him with cold stone eyes. Lyanna's statue was still, unmoving, but he felt her presence there more than ever. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be," he whispered. "I'm not ready for any of this. I never was." A voice echoed behind him. "No one ever is." It was Ned, or rather, the memory of him, shaped by grief and longing. Jon turned, but no one was there. Just silence. But the words remained. The truth didn't care about readiness. It simply was. And now the truth had woken the world. Outside the gates of Winterfell, 3 riders approached in the snow. One of them wearing black armor and a crown of horns made from bone and ice. The Night King had arrived. No words, no warning. Just a wall of the dead rising behind him, stretching across the fields like a sea of rot and silence. From the ramparts, Jon, Sansa, Arya, and Bran watched in still horror. "They're not waiting for dawn," Jon muttered. Arya's hand dropped to her blade. Sansa's breath caught. Bran whispered, "This is where it begins." Jon nodded once. "No," he said, "this is where it ends." The first horn blew just before midnight, a long, cold sound that echoed across Winterfell's walls, sending shivers deeper than any wind could. Every soul within the castle stopped what they were doing. Men dropped cups, women pulled children closer, even the wolves in the kennels howled. The dead had come. Jon stood atop the gatehouse, sword in hand, Ghost at his side. Below him, the army of the living prepared in tense silence. Northern bannermen, Vale Knights, wildlings, Black Brothers of the Night's Watch, and even sellswords who'd once fought only for gold. Tonight, they stood for life. The snow-covered fields before Winterfell churned with shadows. Eyes, blue and cold, flickered in the dark. Thousands of them, and at the center of it all, calm and unmoving, was the Night King, sitting atop his dead dragon like a god of silence and death. Jon's breath steamed in the air. "Tell everyone, we hold the line. We don't break." Beside him, Arya adjusted her twin blades. "And if we do, then we fight inside the walls," Jon said grimly. "Until we can't." Down in the crypts, Sansa stood with Gilly, Sam's wife, and the small folk who had no place on the battlefield. Bran sat nearby, silent, eyes rolled back, warging into the ravens that circled above the battlefield. He was their only warning. Sansa's heart beat wildly. She'd seen many battles now, far too many, but none like this. This wasn't politics. It wasn't betrayal or siege or gold. This was death. And it was knocking. The dead charged. A soundless wave of frost and fury crashed toward the walls. Archers loosed flaming arrows. Siege fireballs exploded against the snow. But the dead kept coming, clawing, crawling, biting, immune to pain, blind to fear. Jon roared, leaping down from the wall to join the front line. Ghost dove beside him, tearing through whites like a beast possessed. Arya moved like a shadow, blades flashing faster than eyes could follow. Still they came, unending. Inside the castle, a scream rang out. The crypts. The dead weren't just outside, they were beneath them too. In the crypts, bones cracked, stone coffins split open, centuries-old corpses, skinless and wild, dragged themselves from rest. Sansa grabbed a dagger from a fallen guard, shielding Gilly and her son. Her hands shook, but she didn't back away. "Sansa!" a voice shouted. Samwell, bloodied but alive, crashing into the chaos with his sword held awkwardly. "Get them out!" They fought side by side, the Lady of Winterfell and the coward-turned-slayer. Not warriors, but survivors. Above, Jon finally saw him. The Night King, dismounting, walking through the fire like it didn't exist. Jon moved forward, longclaw in hand. But before he could strike, the Night King raised his arms, and the dead rose again. All around him, fallen allies stood with blue eyes. Even Ed from the Night's Watch, even Lady Mormont, her small frame now twisted, her roar turned into a cold scream. Jon froze, despair clutching at his heart. It was hopeless. But then, a cry overhead. Drogon. And on his back, Daenerys Targaryen. Flames engulfed the field as she dove in, her dragon burning through whites by the dozens. She looked down and saw Jon, surrounded, and her eyes went wide. She landed hard, swinging him onto Drogon's back, and together they flew toward the Night King, who stood alone now, staring at them with cold hatred. Daenerys leaned forward. Dracarys. Fire consumed the Night King, but when the flames died, he still stood, untouched. Jon jumped from the dragon, charging, screaming. Their blades clashed, ice against steel. Jon fought like a man with nothing to lose, every strike a cry of defiance. But the Night King was stronger, faster, unnatural. He drove Jon to the ground. Just as the Night King raised his blade for the final blow, Arya appeared from the shadows, leaping, silent, Valyrian steel in hand. He turned. Too slow, she plunged the blade into his chest. He shattered. And with him, the dead collapsed. All of them. The battlefield went still. A single heartbeat. Then screams of relief, of victory, of life. Later, as the fires burned the bodies of the fallen, Jon stood with Daenerys, covered in blood and ash. "You saved us," she said. "No," Jon replied quietly. "Arya did." They turned to see her standing in the distance, face unreadable. She had no crown, no throne, no title. But tonight, she had saved the world. In the aftermath, as the dead were buried and Winterfell was rebuilt, word of the battle spread. Bards called Jon the Snow-born King. Others called him Aegon the Just. But to the north, he was still Jon, the boy raised by Ned, the man who fought for the living. And though the realm argued over crowns and bloodlines, one truth had become clear. He was the king they needed, not because of his name, but because, when it mattered most, he chose life.